Hey guys, how's it going? This is Waj from the MW Technology channel on YouTube, and in this video we'll be doing a direct comparison between the Blackberry Q10 and the Samsung Galaxy S4. Now straight off the bat, we should all understand that these are really different smartphones, and even though they may not be directly competing against each other, there are going to be some people wondering which phone to get and some of the pros and cons of each phone individually, and perhaps some of you just want to know how the Blackberry Q10 fares against a large screen smartphone such as the Samsung Galaxy S4. So just one of the first basic things that we're going to look at in comparing these two is the overall physical dimensions of both these devices. Now, this gives you a good idea how they look side by side. So starting with the Blackberry Q10, it measures about 119.6 millimeters in height, 66.8 millimeters in width, and obviously this is going to be a lot more smaller than the Samsung Galaxy S4, which measures about 69.8 millimeters in width and 136.6 millimeters in height. Now straight off the bat, from a design perspective, both these two phones come from a completely different philosophy and spectrum of design. The Blackberry Q10 is using that traditional kind of first generation smartphone, which they kind of pioneered with the actual physical keyboard. And almost half of the device is devoted to an awesome physical keyboard that's probably the best that they've ever made. And there's a lot of people who are devout keyboard users who really need a physical keyboard to do all their day-to-day applications and tasks in a really efficient and quick manner, and a touchscreen is really not going to cut it for them. So in that regard, the Blackberry Q10 offers all the latest kind of features and operating system that you would find in a modern day touchscreen smartphone like the Blackberry Z10 that they just offered a couple of months ago, but with a physical keyboard. Now interestingly, even though the Samsung has the larger footprint compared to the Q10, it actually is 9 grams lighter, weighing about 130 grams versus the Blackberry's 139 grams. Additionally, the Samsung S4 is quite a bit thinner than the Blackberry Q10, measuring about 7.9 millimeters versus the Blackberry's 10.4 millimeters. Now in terms of build quality, I do have to say that both these two devices are kind of made out of really similar materials. They're both made out of really high quality plastics, and in the hand both respectively feel really well. The Blackberry, even though it's a little bit heavier than the Samsung S4, really feels like a durable product that's going to last a really long time, and that keyboard feels really indestructible as well too, so you can hammer on that thing all day without having any issues. Now in terms of screen size, obviously the Samsung S4 has a much larger screen, almost twice as big as what the Q10 offers. But what you have to understand is the Q10 is really devoted to the screen, and half of it's developed to support that large physical keyboard. And it's a sacrifice people will have to make if they want that physical keyboard. But on a positive note, the Q10 actually offers a really high quality, high density screen, even though it's smaller 3.1 inch size. It actually has a perfect 1:1 display, perfectly square, 720 by 720 in resolution. And the Samsung Galaxy S4 obviously has a much larger 5-inch display that is 1920 by 1080 in resolution. And in terms of pixel density, the Q10 is about 328 ppi versus the Samsung's 441. And in real life, when you watch normal things on this screen, on both of these screens look really good. Obviously the Samsung has the more immersive experience, and it's more of a media consumption device. Of course, many business people may want to use it, but again, the Q10 is a more serious device. It has a much more professional look and is less made for media consumption and more of a communication device with a lot of internet and next generation features. Now hardware wise, what comes inside both these two devices is really powerful considering their functionality and what they're kind of made for. Starting with the Blackberry Q10, comes with a dual core processor measuring about 1.5 gigahertz with 2 gigs of RAM, and the S4 obviously has a higher end processor, almost double in power, with a quad core processor measuring about 1.6 gigahertz and with the same 2 gigs of RAM. And funny enough, the Blackberry in a lot of instances performs almost to the same level and sometimes even higher when you're loading up different web pages and certain applications. Obviously, with more CPU and GPU intensive applications, you're going to find the Samsung definitely has a massive edge on the Blackberry, but again, the Blackberry is not really made to run those type of application. Now, both these devices come with some really great cameras, both on the front and back of the devices. So we'll start by testing out the front-facing camera on both these devices. Now, in terms of specification, the GS4 actually has a 1080p front-facing camera at 30 frames per second versus the Q10 has a 720p 30 frames per second camera at the front for video features. But of course, when you watch them side by side, you'll notice they're quite similar. There are some differences in terms of clarity and color rendition. The GS4 definitely is recording at a higher bit rate, and with that, you will see a little bit more color detail, as well as quite a bit more sharpness on the front-facing camera. Now, when we move on to the rear-facing camera, you'll notice that in terms of image quality, the rear-facing camera of both these two devices perform a lot more closer than they do their front-facing camera. In terms of color rendition and clarity, again, there is a slight advantage on the GS4, not as much as on the front-facing camera because they're both really recording 1080p at 30